it's 8:35. We'll call the December 15th meeting of the Sherburne County Economic Development Authority to order. Roll call has been taken, yes? Okay. You were all forwarded the agenda for today, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
You have a motion?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed. All right, and the approval of the November EDA meeting minutes. Any changes, comments, concerns? If not, I'll take the motion to approve.
I'll also make a motion to approve the November meeting minutes.
All right, good work. Second. Please. All right, thank you. All in favor? Everybody.
There's no final voting member here today. No.
Aye.
Oh, thank you. All
Let's
right.
go here.
Thank you. I started getting nervous. It was the minutes, I don't know. All right, so we're on to some business now with the Sherburne County Comprehensive Plan discussion with Mr. Mark Schneider. Are you gonna cue this up, or do we get to bump it right
Get right to
to?
Mark. He's got the background.
All right, I'll grab the slider. I'm just going to introduce it. Lance is going to kind of take, we're tag teaming this. So Lance Bernard from HKGI is our principal planner for this project. Lance is online, coming from the Metro. We had that conversation, so I'll let him speak on behalf of himself. But this presentation is a presentation, it's part of our engagement effort. So we've given this presentation to each township. We've given this presentation to the SWCD board. We're now in front of the EDA board. We're also going to go reach out to the farming community. So we're taking this presentation and going out to what our key stakeholders are and kind of giving them the 101 on our comprehensive plan and highlighting the findings that we've established and the visioning work. And then really the hope is to facilitate a conversation based around economic development and how it can tie into our comprehensive plan. So with that, Lance Bernard, I'm going to let you kind of run with this first part of the presentation.
Sure, and I'll just yell at you to advance the slides. So appreciate the opportunity to sit down with this group. This is a fun project for us, and we're definitely having a blast working through this with county staff and just really getting to know more of the stakeholders throughout the county. So Mark, if you want to advance the slide. A few of you may have been part of some of the earlier engagement efforts, be aware of what we're trying to accomplish here, but ultimately we're working on updating the county's comprehensive land use plan. And this plan really is a basis for a lot of the planning and land use decisions that are made at the county level. And it's also a guide and resource for townships and cities to understand what this county's aspirations are for future growth and development. So the last plan was done in 2011. Comp plans are typically updated every 10 years, so this is a perfect opportunity to dive back into an update here in 2022. So our process typically unfolds over a year process. We really kicked things off in the summer, and we've gone through a lot of early engagement exercises of just really listening, understanding what the bigger concerns are, things that we need to do to really make sure that this is a meaningful plan for another 10 years and really accurately reflect the direction and the path that we think the county is going and where we go next. So a little bit of an iterative process where we kind of bounce around a little bit, but we're really trying to get into the heart of establishing bigger updates to the land use plan right now, understanding where the bigger changes are for policy decisions, potentially recommendations on how to move forward with zoning code updates as well. So as we get out of the holiday, we're really going to be hitting it hard again, and continuing to meet with stakeholders and really present where some of those bigger changes are that we're going to be recommending as part of this update. And yeah, you can stay on the slide, but then we're also working on the county's park and recreation system plan. So another team in our office is working on that update, Public Works and Gina Hugo as well. And so there's a lot of synergy of kind of holding some of these efforts together over the next year.
Yeah, so right now it's been really kind of heavy in the listening session, going out, talking to people, getting feedback. And I'm really excited about today's meeting to be able to kind of have that discussion here. So I appreciate EDA's, opening the floor for us for this discussion. But yeah, the next phase is really kind of putting pen to paper with all the responses and guidance.
Yeah. So what's really kind of interesting and fun about this update is the county is one of the few that is really projected to experience a lot of growth over the next 20 years. A lot of the counties we've been working in are tackling different issues and just how to retain and attract residents and businesses, as the state demographer has really projected statewide a decline or stagnant growth amongst many of the greater Minnesota counties. But as we look at Sherburne County, Wright County, Stearns, the metro area, we'll continue to see a fair amount of growth over the next 20 to 40 years. So we're really tackling a lot of bigger kind of growth conversations as part of this update, knowing that the increase of new people is also presenting different changes in demographics from an aging population, different needs within the county. And, that's a variety of things we're exploring: housing needs, business needs, job growth needs, certain things that are covering all aspects of the county. So just kind of highlighting some of the things we're thinking about here. And the good news is the county has been well aware of that growth, right? There's been a lot of great planning that's been done over the years, updates to the transportation plan, housing studies, a lot of effort on just what the transportation system means as we continue to grow, particularly along those major corridors, Highway 10, Highway 169, and then a lot of efforts that I'm sure many of you have been part of with the Central Mississippi River Regional Planning Partnership. So great work that's been done that is really also helping inform this update. We don't want to recreate the wheel, but we certainly want to leverage a lot of the efforts that have been done to date. So one thing that we're really kind of grappling with as we look at all these changes and what growth means to the county, we've developed a kind of a state of the county report, if you will, that starts to highlight a number of those changes, a number of the trends that we're seeing. So that's on the project website that you can take a look at. And we're just kind of taking out a few elements of that report here of what we're seeing from market trends. And things have really changed dramatically, obviously, over the last couple of years after COVID. Certainly things were changing prior to COVID and just how people were shopping, their needs, how their living choices and so forth. So as planners, as we're doing a lot of comprehensive plan updates, it's been fascinating to see the vast amount of changes and market trends that are really influencing communities. So how do we best set the stage for Sherburne County in the next 10 years to be adaptable and flexible to those trends? It's hard to predict all of these trends. So I think one of the common themes for us that we're really trying to test the waters on is how flexible are we and how adaptable are we to these trends? And that, to some respect, translates to just zoning controls as well. So as part of the comprehensive plan, we're really trying to figure out, where changes need to happen. So we can provide kind of meaningful recommendations on potential ordinance changes to create that flexibility and where we're allowing rural businesses to occur throughout the county. What is the city's role? What is the county's role from an economic development standpoint? So yeah, you can keep moving forward here. One thing that we thought would add a lot of value to this process and county staff wanted to see as part of this update is really looking at some new data sets. And so part of our project team includes Streetlight. Streetlight's a company that basically collects millions of cell phone GPS records from various apps and various companies and translates all of those GPS records into really solid information on how people are traveling throughout different parts of the region. So we have the ability to look at things at a very site-specific level or a countywide level of how people are moving throughout the county. And so a couple of the analysis we wanted to do was really understand conditions pre and post-COVID. And so I'll walk you through a couple of those here of what we were looking at, but there's a lot more information behind this analysis at the end of the presentation we wanted to provide for you guys to really sink your teeth into. So at a high level, we wanted to understand travel patterns at a county-wide level and also looking at Highway 10, because certainly transportation patterns have a huge influence on land use decisions and how we're planning for land uses along those corridors, specifically in this case, thinking about Highway 10 and 169. So at a high level, no real surprise during the last 2 years, there was a decrease in traffic volume that kind of correlates to more people just working from home as commute trips are down as well. But as we looked at this information, we also saw a steady incline or freight traffic, truck traffic staying the same or increasing, which I think you can kind of make some assumptions that correlates to just the amount of freight that's being moved throughout the state now. A lot of that tying back to just people doing more online shopping and delivery services as well. So again, a lot more information behind this. It's really easy to nerd out and dig deep into this, but that's kind of a quick snapshot on the traffic piece. The next slide, what we also wanted to look at is just how people were interacting and using the county park system and the regional trail, the Great Northern Trail. So this information was feeding into the park system plan that we're working in as well. And during that time between 2019 and 2021, we really saw a huge increase in the number of daily visitors to the county parks and more usage of the Great Northern Trail. So this information is really great to help support county staff in applying for grant funding and just really better understanding the needs of the park system. So as we think about, the annual users just continue to increase in the park system, and they're certainly working through the park system plan effort of just understanding then what are those needs within those county parks if we're bringing on new entities or new services within those parks. And then we were also asked to look a little bit more closely at how people were using the government center, and were we seeing continued services and people visiting the government center over the pandemic. And probably no surprise here, as more people were working from home and things morphed to more online services, there was certainly a decrease in the number of trips to the government center, a fairly significant decrease. And I think as you talk to more county staff or talk to just people that utilize services at the county government center, you'll see that there is just many more people that are doing things more online now as well. And then finally, another quick snapshot of just understanding what development may have meant over the last couple of years, where people are moving to, where people are gravitating towards. And so we took a quick look at the Brigg Lakes area. We know that there's some smaller subdivision lots that have happened over the last couple of years, but I think what was interesting was seeing that there's many more trips being generated year round compared to more seasonal trips that happened early on in 2019. So this may suggest more people are living year round in their homes at Briggs Lake, which may have been more kind of seasonal summer, cabin type homes as well. So just more attraction to that area. Different land use changes have happened with subdivisions, but interesting snapshot just to see that we've got many more people traveling in and around the Briggs Lake area.
Yeah, and Lance, if I could just interject on that one, it's one of those hamlets. Sherburne County has all these multiple different hamlets: Hamlet of Orac, Briggs Lake, San Diego Township, and I think Briggs, the Palmer area, it kind of shows the opportunity I think that exists there with this increase in people utilizing this property and living in that area. The ability to have that work from home flexibility is maybe allowing people to stay there year round or move out there. The smaller lots that were out there did get consumed pretty quickly. So it's an interesting, I think, analysis And that's kind of why we asked for the Briggs Lake kind of evaluation, just to see what it looked like up there. And the fact that we saw, Lance, what is that, 55% increase post-pandemic?
Yeah.
In that area, it's significant. So, I mean, it changes character and, so it shows that, there's obviously an appetite for it, but, what could this translate to other hamlets in Sherburne County? And I think Orac might be another one that has that future, or has that in their future. So I just wanted to piggyback on that, Lance.
Yep, no, great
Mark,
point.
Mark, I have a comment. Did you look at this for all of the, lake areas in the county? If there was any noticeable change in patterns?
We did not. We focused on the Briggs Lake area because it had the highest population of any of our hamlets. So it really was kind of reserved in this area, this analysis. So it's really, at this point, I guess, trying to pull it apart and what does it mean for the other communities. And Lance, do you think any of the other street lake data, the overall evaluation of our transportation system, we might be able to extract some additional stuff on the other areas in Sherburne County, those other lake areas?
Yeah, I think there's some opportunity where we can dig a little bit deeper at that first analysis of travel patterns, countywide. So not to belabor it too much, but just to kind of give you guys a sense of where our mind is at when we look at this type of information. And Mark's going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing from the engagement exercise and the visioning exercise, and not to steal your thunder, Mark, but we heard a lot, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, is just the divide of rural agricultural communities and people wanting to retain more rural identities and agricultural identity. And so as you start to see areas like Briggs Lake that is increasing in density or population, I should say, how does that balance with that rural identity that people are wanting to see or retain? So it kind of gives us a lot of discussion of how we best articulate what these areas should be and how we best help guide land use decisions to protect the natural resources, Briggs Lake, and balance that with that rural identity character that people are looking to have in that area.
Yeah. And the neat thing about the visioning exercise, so I directly sent this out to over 2,000 people, and all our different boards, and we got good feedback, from the public on this engagement survey. So the survey had, I think, maybe 10 questions focusing on growth, housing, economic development, ag, natural resources, county identity, and county services. But one of the first things that we asked, and we didn't isolate this to Sherburne County or township residents, we pushed it out across the board. So we directed to some business owners. So that stakeholder list is pretty broad that we sent it to. So we were looking for broad feedback. We didn't want to just hear from our townships that we have zoning authority over. We wanted to hear from all the communities within Sherburne County and the businesses too. So in doing that, the first question that we asked is, well, which city or township do you live in? And so you didn't have to live in Sherburne County to complete this survey. So we got respondents from, other areas, people who had different perspectives. So that gave us an opportunity to kind of divide the survey in how people responded. People from the city responded, I'll jump into it, where they wanted more housing options in the urban areas. But the rural areas wanted to see preservation of the kind of the standard 2.5 acres subdividing. So we got to see those distinctions, on the urban areas to the rural areas. And some of the things that kind of jumped out at us when we were doing this analysis, we really still have a missing middle. There is a demand for that missing middle housing opportunity. The kind of maybe not exactly entry level, but that second level housing, the duplexes, things like that. And the demand on that is really in our urban areas. It's around the urban fringes. So that's not something that we're looking to push out in our broader communities. But one concept that really did resonate with people was the concept of life cycle housing. Giving people opportunities to live and stay in the communities that they chose to live in. So that Briggs Lake area kind of comes up again as an example of, hey, would there be any opportunities to have, some entry-level housing opportunities and also housing opportunities for senior populations. And we're starting to see some decent examples of where that does succeed inside kind of the, hamlet area of the township. So there are opportunities for that. So we started getting some pretty good feedback. the idea of live work is nothing new, so live where you work is nothing new, but it really did get accelerated through the pandemic. The ability to work from home. And so this visioning survey is really helping us shape our vision statements, which will follow these couple slides. So, but to tie this back to economic development, so what did we hear? So we had, I think, 3 questions that really focused. 3 or 4 questions. They all had some connection to economic development. And I think someone, in response to the visioning workshop that the EDA board said, kind of made a comment that everything is economic development. And that's kind of what Lance and I were bumping into also. A lot of our questions, whether it's residential, it all still has some connection to economic development. And so when we did this survey, we asked a handful of direct questions towards economic development, but a lot of our questions did overlap with economic development and land use. So overall, 67% supported reinvestment in amenities that benefit existing residents and businesses. I thought that was kind of a unique or interesting thing. So many times we talk about going out and finding new businesses, bringing new businesses in. But the overall response to this question was, no, we want to see reinvestment. We want to see support of our existing businesses that benefit the people that are here. So I thought that was kind of a telling statement. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there because of all the entrepreneurial activities in Sherburne County. So both of the statements were valued for economic development, encourage growth in existing business properties and industrial sites, and promote to attract new business and industry on a regional scale. So it's also that broader regional scale, but try and also focus on our smaller sites that we already have going forward. And then again, both these statements were valued. So this question had kind of the survey had that scale where you could slide it back and forth. And so when I say both statements were valued, it kind of landed in the middle. And it said maintain services that meet the needs of existing residents and businesses. But then the city responded, so that's where we were able to break it out by, what jurisdiction they were responding from. So city responded said they favored focus on new investment in services for future generations to lead to a healthier lifestyle, more productive lifestyle, a little bit more. So the vision survey gave us some guidance and really did highlight the difference. And one thing that I heard at the meeting last month when I came to the EDA meeting was one thing that stuck out to me was, a little bit of focus on our townships. What do the townships have going on? What type of business opportunities are occurring in our townships? And maybe the discussion there needs to take place. And I think that surveys show that there's really differing opinions from city to township levels. So Lance, I'll let you jump back into the kind of the findings from the visioning exercise and those key differences between rural and city. Maybe. Lance, drop off.
He's still out there.
There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah. No, spot on, Mark. I think there's a lot that we need to think about how we really kind of balance ideas and policy changes across the county and being really mindful of things are going to apply much differently in the more urban areas of the county versus the agricultural rural parts of the county. So we do want to, recognize that and certainly work towards an update that really articulates the differences of how these are being applied to these various kind of transects of the county. So next slide, please. So to really kind of start off at like a 10,000 foot level, we wanted to develop more vision statements and really be able to express kind of the overall arching vision for the county over the next 20 years. And so this is really helping us kind of get some consensus on more value statements that we've looked more closely at that really are aiming to basically provide a higher quality of life for all throughout the county. And so next slide. So one of the value statements that we've created and drafted is really still kind of being tweaked to some degree. This has gone to, well, let me back up. The value statements have gone out to all of our stakeholders. We presented this at one of the stakeholder meetings. We've worked on it very closely with county staff. So it's seen a couple different refinements and iterations over the last month, but feeling pretty confident on where these vision statements lie now. We're getting a lot of kind of thumbs up and consensus around them. Maybe still a little wordsmithing, but I think we're really close in these statements really reflecting and articulating the county's values and what we're trying to accomplish over the next 20 plus years. So the first value statement, we value our natural resources, rich history, and diverse communities. Really want to try to accomplish thoughtful land use planning and growth management practices. We'll work to strengthen community character and identity while being respectful stewards of our county resources.
And this one, Lance, if I could just kind of chime in, as we're coming up with this statement, so the natural resources have been a, key component of, something we're looking to protect, but our rich history, and that really kind of got highlighted as we went out, Zach, as we went out and started talking to the townships, you started seeing the deep history of Sherburne County and the people that have served our townships. And there's something really valuable there that I'm looking to promote and also try and preserve. And when you have high rates of development, it can alter and change that. So trying to call those values out and make those values important to other people, to highlight what those values are. So that's kind of, a nod to the existing history and the work that's been done in Sherburne County. And the diversity really comes to, the fact that we have such a diverse county. We have the urban areas, we have the townships, and there's a major contrast between them. So Lance, I just wanted to piggyback on that because it was one of those things that's going out to the townships. It was really neat to hear how different each township is from one from the other. So.
Yep. Yeah, and then we were hearing a lot from our stakeholders as well, just how do we best balance land use decisions throughout the county that really give people the opportunity to thrive and improve their quality of life. So I won't read this one for verbatim, but it was really looking much more closely at those land use practices that we really want to find opportunities for future generations to thrive and really make sure decisions are improving the public's health, safety, and welfare. So this, yeah. And then what we really are talking to the stakeholders as well is that we're not just at this alone, that we really are working together collaboratively with the cities, the townships, state agencies, businesses, you name it. We're really working closely and really trying to advance some of these initiatives. So we really wanted to have a value statement that reflected that we're really trying to build stronger communities and working together and fostering those partnerships. So this being the last value statement of the three is really trying to recognize those partnerships and that it's going to take other people and other partners to really advance the comprehensive plan and other initiatives throughout the county.
Yeah, that partnership really stuck out. CMRP was something that really highlighted, at times we were working there's some silos there, working very siloed, and even in our county at times. And, the need to cross those lines, Jessica being added to the county with economic development, bringing her into play when we have new businesses coming in, whether it's a small business looking to start up. It's really, this partnership is what's going to help make this county succeed. And it's a big component of our, the comprehensive plan. We really want to emphasize how those where those opportunities for those partnerships exist, and then come up with strategies to implement them and make sure we're utilizing all the resources that are out there amongst our communities.
So from all of that work and all those listening sessions, we're feeling pretty confident about those vision or value statements. Where we're really sinking our teeth in now is all the different type of areas of focus that we need to tackle. We heard were things that need to be reflected in the comprehensive plan. And so we were really trying to pull out some of those common themes from an economic development perspective. But as Mark mentioned, and we saw through some of your earlier visioning notes, economic development can really be just about everything. We can't ignore the fact that there's a lot of overlap when we think about economic development, from businesses to housing needs, education, services, trainings, all that good stuff kind of wraps into this bigger umbrella. But what we wanted to just show to you today was just really where some of those common themes were really resonating from those discussions, and really categorizing them into these buckets, again, trying to be respectful of the different needs and issues that are occurring across the different transects of the county. And so as we look at the agricultural communities, we were really hearing a common theme about flexibility and really trying to understand how we can open the door for more opportunities in those agricultural areas to accommodate different housing needs, whether that's just being able to split farmstead and keep the farmhouse for mom and dad to live in, or also have kind of a additional ADU space for some additional living quarters on that farm. And then beyond that, to just other different types of businesses through the agricultural or rural communities of allowing different rural home occupations, event space, hobby farms. How do we give people that opportunity to thrive? And so that really poses questions on how we look at how the zoning policies, zoning codes are structured today. And are there barriers that are limiting some of those needs or wants by residents throughout the county? And so I think if we want to explore that flexibility, allowing for different things to occur in the rural agricultural areas, they also come with ways to think about different performance standards or how we balance those new uses with natural resources and neighbors, so we can continue to retain that rural agricultural identity that so many people cherish. And then at a high level, when we think about just kind of the cities, what is their role in this, and how do we best redefine or better define some of the growth areas on the fringes where some of those higher intensity uses are being allowed and being planned for that have access to city services. And so we're also met with a number of cities, one-on-one to just talk about their initiatives when it comes to development and where they're really trying to focus and encourage growth to happen. So that will certainly be reflected in the comprehensive plan as well. And then countywide, I think there's a lot of things that we have to think about just across the board. As Mark mentioned, life cycle housing, that really trickles across the entire county, across all agencies, cities, townships. And then how do we invest in the assets that the county manages today, whether that's roads, parks, continuing the broadband discussion to just support a higher quality of life. So from all of these things, I think what we're trying to kind of get out of you today is just really what resonates with you as priorities. Are there areas that we're not thinking about or that we haven't maybe today or have on this slide? And then, really what is the county's role when it comes to economic development? Are we, which I think are some of the questions you guys are tackling as a group now. So are we wanting to make sure that your vision work, your strategies, your initiatives are in alignment with the comprehensive plan? So yeah, let me pause there and just open it up and see if anybody's got any questions or thoughts, since we've thrown a lot at you in the last 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, Lance and I, like we tend to do, we talk a lot. So Lance has some similar characteristics as I do. We like to talk about this stuff. We obviously, try to pull in, incorporate, but really it's now that we want that discussion with this group. These areas that we've kind of flushed out, because we haven't had a conversation with, this group specifically focusing on what the theme should be in our comprehensive plan. So out of those topics, the question is, what should the county's priorities be? What are the key themes? And is there anything missing on this list, on these lists for cities, townships that maybe should be incorporated? Things that maybe are not a high priority. Maybe if we could go back to this as a presenting, because I think I must have clicked out of it, presenting mode. There we go.
I could start. I know one thing we've heard from these surveys is the townships want to be more involved. So Jessica's main role will be to go out to each township and get to know them a little better. What are their needs? What can we help? She's also started a business retention program where she's visiting local businesses in the townships. And so we've already had one that had some issues with zoning, wanted to make things a little easier, so we set up a meeting with staff. So that process is starting, and a lot of that is based on feedback that we got from the survey, is they really do want to be more involved.
The townships, the township officials.
When you go to what is the county's role in economic development, I think that's one step we're taking, is to help fill that gap.
Dan? Dan, to piggyback off of that, with the, townships and stuff, I think the county has to, I've always looked at it as we take a third of the tax off of residential development or existence, and we take a quarter off of the, businesses.
Correct.
So I think that we do play a role in assisting, and especially for a city perspective, when most of that falls all on a city to provide the needs for those developments. And when we're looking at into the township, I'm curious, have we looked at some of the areas? I think Big Lake Township and Orrock Township have had a couple of developments that it took a while for them to get off the ground, not due to more due to the environment of downturns and market housing market collapses, but they did do their sewer in a more of a hole where there was a sewer component that served all of the houses in that development, and then they all play a role in supporting that. And I'd like to get a better understanding, how is that working? What would be helpful to help maybe do? I know right now those entities cannot do for lack of payment, an assessment like a city can do for the services. And that could help eliminate the need for each individual property to have room for a septic system. I'm just curious, when we talk about what more can be developed in our townships, I think we have to recognize the sewer and water needs that go along with that. And how can we create something that's going to be helpful in a combined effort, which would allow those growth opportunities? Just an observation. And like I said, we've got a couple that I think would be good things to look at to see how have they been successful and what has been some issues. I know that we went in as a county a few years back on the one out off of County Road 43 because of the housing market crash. They struggled with keeping that maintained, so we borrowed them money to be able to get that back up. So I'm just curious. I think these are great opportunities, but we have to be realistic on the water.
Yep. Yeah, Commissioner, I know that that's certainly a discussion item we've had amongst our team as we think about different land development options in the rural areas. What does that really mean from a sewer perspective, right? So if we're working on these shared community systems, what works, what doesn't work, because there's a variety of success stories, and then there's certainly a variety of stories where that doesn't work out so well. So yes, the comp plan is definitely going to be looking at and tackling that as what are the pros and cons of those different type of development options when you think about the services that are needed if you're doing any kind of smaller lot development in the township areas.
And to my understanding, most of those lots in the two that I referenced, one is the shores of Eagle and the other one is out off of County Road 43. And those are like 2.5 plus acre lots. Then we have another development off of 43 that is just across the street from the school in the city that are smaller 1 acre lots in a PUD style development. And people, when they buy into those developments, don't have an understanding of their sewer and water needs into the future. So when their sewer ends up needing to be replaced, they come across a very expensive because they don't have the space to expand that sewer system, and they are forced into mound systems and other pumping systems. So just to get a clear understanding of how we can be more helpful in planning those thoughts into the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's kind of the partnership where we talked about, the need to work closely with our cities to understand where they're going. Lance and I did go out, meet with community development directors and planners to talk about their growth projections, but incorporating those projections, those areas that they are going to see growth, where they need to see growth, to make sure our plans align, that our comprehensive land use plan identifies those areas as urban fringe areas that have opportunities for different types of development. It might be in the township right now, but it's on the fringe of the city, and we need to account for where cities have invested in their long-term services, Commissioner Danielowski, and I think that's gonna be definitely a component of this plan, that'll be reflected in our land use map, in the zoning district, and the new land use districts that we establish in Sherburne County.
I want to add to that too. When I was out doing a BRNE visit, it was actually at a sewer company. And one of the things that they said, to your point, Rayanne, is that the homeowner education piece, because people don't understand the functions of their house and specifically sewer and how, exactly how that operating system works and what they're getting into. And they specifically brought up kind of those cluster developments with shared sewer. So that might be something when we're, during these discussions, maybe even pulling in a sewer company on what their thoughts are on these design systems and what they see and deal with and the costs and impacts of that when it doesn't work out. But then also, I'm pretty sure the city of Becker has experience with that type of sewer system too, so they may be another resource to tap into.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, and I think you hit on that education piece. You get people that come, they just see, wow, look at my land, look at my space. I'm living out here in my dream with no thought process when they're buying as to the sewer and water. They have no understanding of that whole system. They're used to having it just done for them normally if they're coming from the metros. So I think you're dead on that. And when they go wrong, if they're a shared system because someone isn't paying what they need to help pay to keep the system in good condition and improvements when needed, because they don't get it, they have no teeth to be able to.
Great
So
point,
that
great point, Rayanne. Home ownership, property ownership does come with some responsibility. And so not everything of knowing how your septic and private well works is really the responsibility of the county and zoning.
Education is a recurring theme for us, and on lots of different levels, on natural resources, on the idea of establishing a small business on their residential property, how to manage a property, and how to manage a residential subdivision. Zach, share the story, because we were at the SWCD board. It's kind of funny because
we were up at Palmer Township and we had a very large turnout. A lot of residents were there as well, very involved meeting. And one of the residents actually said, all these people moving up here don't know how to live country, right? Which we kind of laughed at the time, but there's a big education component that comes along with, people come from the cities, water, sewer goes down the toilet, down the drain, and, goes to wastewater treatment plant. They don't think about it. And, just kind of an interesting concept. And we do a lot of education.
But it's falling
outreach. Yeah, but it's falling short. And how do we get people to read those documents, to check those things and actually take it in?
Yeah, and if that, that's always a good piece, and if that's a role that the county wants to play in at some point, I don't know where it plays specifically into economic development at this point. But a few key things from the comp plan that I believe do play into economic development that have been discussed. Zoning is a huge part of economic development, and it's one that gets overlooked a lot because, in my opinion, zoning is handled by planners. Planners, a lot of times, are on the opposite end of economic development. And so to find that middle ground, that balance in the zoning ordinances, I think is probably one of the biggest components for economic development. Ease of operation, and what I mean by that is the more things that can be done without variances, PUDs, CUPs, and that's all done by proper zoning and ordinances. But when a business is coming to town and they realize that if they come to certain areas of Sherburne County and it's going to be an 8-month process, a 10-month process just to get something done where, I hop across the creek and I can wrap this up in 3 months. Well, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in time. And so having the processes through the zoning, part of it, and the more things that can be done administratively, the better, I think is huge. But, and I think it's, one of the components that does not get discussed enough with economic development, where we talk about TIF financing and all kinds of other things, and yes, everything is, everything is economic development. The thing is, as an EDA, we can't worry about everything, anything done, so, I'm not gonna debate whether parks are important to economic development, they could very well be, however, as an EDA board, let the Parks Commission take care of parks, because we just can't bring that in here, so. Those are some of my thoughts, on that. That the zoning is a big thing, the ease of startup is a very big. We can lose a lot of businesses when they get bogged down in red tape. I mean, if they come into the zoning office.
For sure, that's such a good correlation or connection between our, to our worlds. Yes, being the planner, okay, I have an ordinance, here are all the rules and honestly obstacles to get through this process. And okay, yes, it's gonna take 6 months to go through it, and I need you to invest, $50,000 in paperwork before I can give you an approval. Well, they're going through this process, that's a huge obstacle. I have a, project that's coming back right now to amend one of the conditional use permits because they got this conditional use permit, and one of the conditions is too onerous, it's too it doesn't work with their business plan. So we're hampering them moving forward because of these, elaborate conditions. And I think what I'm hearing Ken saying is, well, it's one thing I've been hearing in the townships too, is, the desired from the public, more flexibility in how we apply or how the rules are applied. But to do that, you have to come up with, the performance standards and ordinance to make it so it's not a public hearing. So we establish the conditions, in our zoning ordinance as performance standards to allow uses to go forward. So they know what the obstacles are and they don't have to go through a public hearing process for all projects. So we properly zone those properties, and then we open up the list of uses that can be done there and make sure we're covering the basic performance standards we need to cover for environmental and public safety needs.
Yeah, and I think to Ken's point, I hear what he's saying in regards to that, but that would be probably specific to areas. If you're talking a business that is going into an area that is zoned to be a business area, we can do those things probably a lot more easily and make them less of a process to go through. But when you're doing things where you're creating a CUP or an IUP in an area that it wasn't zoned for, like residential communities, then there's some things where you have to be balancing. You have to be balancing the neighborhood that people bought their homes out there in a residential neighborhood, that now you have people that are wanting to do home businesses. So there's a balance that we're going to be forced to look at going forward as to how do we accomplish this and meet the needs that people want to see doing more work from home. And where is the line from a home business developing somewhat in their garage and hopefully getting them built up to where they will move out into an area where they're zoned better for that growth.
Commissioner Danielski, I think I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's one of the things that I actually would like the EDA board to kind of continue to think about, because it's one of the things that is going to show up in our comprehensive plan, is that balance. So developing businesses in our rural areas and residential areas, what kind of impact does that have on our urban areas, the cities, and the industrial parks that are out there? Where is that balance? And by ordinance, we can tighten up performance standards, we can, manage businesses in rural areas, but it's a tough balance because we really do need those small businesses out in our rural communities. But where is that tipping point that, those businesses should be going into a city, expanding, relocating out of a township and going into an urban area, is one of the areas that I think is tough. And I hope that conversation continues, because that is one of the things that we wrestle with. We've always been very supportive of, the small businesses in our rural communities by policy, by ordinance and things like that. So is that going to change in the next 20 years? And what do we need to do to respond to it?
Right.
Yeah, because I think we want to continue to support those things, because we've got a good number of businesses that started out in their garages and then have developed into, I know Sport Tech was one of them. We've got Isometrics, Lupulin Brewing Company. Those are all good examples of businesses that started in their, air quotes, garage. And then eventually grew and moved into the areas where, their growth needs were supported.
Yeah, having zoning from startup, through 50 years of growth in a company, I think is important and something that we need to look at. That's something I heard when I was visiting some townships too, that they want to encourage businesses out in the townships that are sometimes overlooked. Another area that I don't think EDA focuses on, probably enough is housing. Housing to me is a very big component of economic development. And, you know, we look at businesses, gotta bring in businesses. However, I'd like to see, you know, at some point, you know, from a purely economic development standpoint, which to me means money and tax base, circulation of money, is it better to have the business come up with 50 employees and have them live in Maple Grove, or is it better to have them live in Sherburne County and work in Maple Grove and come and spend their money here? You know, both are important, but housing and taking care of housing needs is very important. You know, and you can spin it many, many different ways. I know with some companies, you know, the first thing they look at is available workforce. Okay, so to have a workforce, you have to have housing to bring people to the area. So what comes first? Hard to say. Did people move here because of the job, or does the jobs move here because of the people? These are things that we're not gonna answer, but we need to at least recognize the importance of them.
Well, the housing study that the EDA board authorized has been a huge help. It really did highlight those challenges, and those are some of the key things that we're working on and kind of focusing on with this plan. So to get that full spectrum of housing that I think we need to serve the businesses that are coming up here, you know.
Plus, I think we have to recognize too, the cost of the infrastructure to support those is highly important to have a better understanding of, because that is a huge burden to any developer to have to support at the cost of what sewer and water needs are, and expansion. If you're in a city, there's an expansion. City of Big Lake right now is at its max potential for what their systems were designed for. And that's why they're having to look at a $30 million expansion to help support the next phase of housing unit in lots.
That's
And
great, right?
Pardon?
So that's great.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
It is great,
interject
but it's a
here
huge
quickly.
cost that goes into
I have a
sack and whack
question.
fees that developers have to pay.
Rand, excuse me, I'm gonna give the floor to Felix here for a little bit.
And I just have a quick question, and then there's a lot of us in this room. I think, I'm gonna ask a question, and then maybe we should go around the table and try to get to everyone and try to get as much content out of this group, because there's a lot wealth of brains in this room, I can tell that, so. My question is, you know, I came to office 20 years ago. At that time, Sherburne County had a population of 68,000. Now we're just bumping right at 100,000. That growth is considerably more than what is projected in the future. So I'm just curious, are you pretty confident in your growth projections that we're looking at over the next 40 years? So.
You know, the state demographer is the one that we're using as our resource. So I mean, it's kind of a, you know, and I think, Dan, you asked me that at one point too, you know, how confident we are in those numbers, because you know, I think people expect more than 22%. Lance, maybe it's just something we need to dig into a little bit deeper, Lance.
Well, I'll just add quickly to that. We always challenge the state demographer. We always say they're gonna be wrong, and then they're always right. So, you know, but I mean, I've got to ask the question.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking.
And I think we should move around the room and try to share the time we have here.
Let's do that then.
Jared, why don't we start with you? I was just gonna go back to one thing that Ken said here, right? One of the first things that companies look at, again, this is me looking at it through an industrial lens, right, is that one of the first things we do in our business analysis is we look at workforce and available folks. And if we don't have that, we move on to the next facility, right? And that's one reason why, In Big Lake, we chose to continue to expand because we saw an expanding workforce, we saw a growing population. And that's why we continue to grow in Big Lake versus, you know, our Mason City, Iowa, Lake Odessa, Michigan plants as well too, because those counties have been either stagnant or negative as far as their growth in population. So that's the one thing I thought of when Ken was talking about, you know, housing and affordable housing, right? That's a huge piece of it. Because folks, again, don't want to drive very far to work. So that's one thing we're seeing, and we're in a good spot from a staffing perspective right now, but again, we're looking to grow here in the future as well, and we need to attract more jobs. And unfortunately, but fortunately, from an economic development piece, right, Big Lake area is growing it from an industrial standpoint. But that does present more challenges too, so that's one of my biggest concerns and things that we need to continue to talk about is, again, that housing piece, getting folks in the area, because we need that workforce.
I'm Josh, I'm with the city of Elk River, so I have the lens of the city, but I think the focus on the density impacts to infrastructure is important. Obviously, we're dealing with the 169 redefine in Elk River, but to kind of have this 20-year lens of where people will be and the impacts of infrastructure is going to be important, not only for homeowners, but where businesses end up.
Mr. Dolan, what's your wisdom?
You know, if you talk about the county's role in economic development, really the role that we can control and have the biggest impact on is the housing, bar none. You know, you look at economic development and the way it's looked at in the profession and at the government level, a lot of times, you know, we're looking at industrial and core uses. The county doesn't run cities, and that's where those businesses need to locate. Our role is a supplementary role to what the city's efforts are, right? I don't want to say we're hands off on that, but we're along for the ride and doing what we can to assist the cities. We're not the driver there, so.
But as far as impact to the comprehensive plan.
Right, so the housing has because the housing is such a key point regardless of the type of economic development, housing always comes into play. I think we need to take a real close look at where we allow more dense development. We're pretty much 2.5 acre lots pretty universally across the county. And as costs of development get driven up, you know, people buying swaths of land and having to develop 2.5 acre lots versus being able to split them up into 1/2 acre lots is going to substantially, you know, a good tool to keep an eye on. If we corner development and needing to be, you know, you even look at cities and infill development. Elk River is a good example. You get on the fringes of Elk River and it's big acreage development, you know, and now the turn is more inward on infill because it's just too expensive to develop on the outskirts with those higher standards. So controlling the cost and the opportunities, I like the talking about ADUs as a huge opportunity because of how big our lots and accommodating ADUs are something that we can look at just as much as we look at, you know, rural businesses and home-based businesses function a lot like ADUs, a lot of the same demands. You know, transportation's the biggest. Logistics and transportation are the huge pieces that we gotta keep an eye on along with housing, but those are the 3 P's in my opinion.
Great. You don't get to talk, Mark.
The muzzle's been put on.
I agree with the housing probably, you know, I've got those college age kids that, you know, graduated and my friends and family, you know, trying to move back to the area and there's just not affordable housing for them. And I think that, you know, even attracting from our business, you know, to get employees to move and live in the area, it's pretty moot at this point because there's just not any places. So I agree. Housing is probably, I think, the #1 workforce issue right now.
And statistically, you're right. By this discussion Monday in Becker about the industrial park and the, you know, what are we going to do to market that industrial park with all the stuff going on? And my big question is what are we going to do about the housing? So statistically, in the Becker zip code, There are 13 homes for sale. 7 of those homes are new builds, which means that it's a bare lot. We will build this house on there, so they're gonna always sit on there, they're not gonna move. Means there's 5 homes available. Think about, you said that Sherburne County has 100,000 population. Right now, if you were to take a look at the homes built prior to 2021, so we can exclude all those to-be builds, there are 98 homes on the market as of right now. That's it. So you go, and that's not even talking about the affordability. You know, the affordability index, we've talked about that at the last meeting. And granted, the rates came down a little bit and the median house, the price dropped a little bit, but, you know, I think it was last month, the median family income no longer qualifies for the median sale price of a home. So it goes to your point too. I mean, as a business coming to look in there, even if you bring the people, where are they gonna live? You can attract these businesses all day long, but then like you said, the people aren't gonna live here. They're gonna have to go find housing somewhere else, cause it's just not available here.
Dan's having a thought, I can.
Well, I just noticed there's a lot more multifamily popping up throughout, so as homes become more unaffordable, you'll see a lot more apartments being built, and that's what you're seeing in Elk River right now. There's several new apartments, there's one in Becker, and Zimmerman's obviously exploded with apartments over the last couple of years, so there is a transition there on the type of housing that is available. And I just wanna add, Laura didn't say broadband, but broadband's obviously a huge factor, and I think we should still rely on that, because if you do have a home and you wanna work from there, you do need a good connection, so those are the 2 things I wanted to mention.
I would echo what pretty much everyone else said, double down on the housing piece in particular. Zoning, I think, is very critical, and you probably heard through our community development director, you know, some of the challenges we face with some of the larger lots and home occupation type things, whether or not, you know, those fit or don't fit and how they might fit in the county. And, you know, I come from an area where, in rural areas in particular, farm-based business and home-based business was very important. The last thing I'd like to add that I don't think anyone's mentioned, in conjunction with all other infrastructure, is how important transportation itself is. And the movement of goods, the movement of people, you know, is absolutely critical. And I think it also is one where the transportation really frames up and defines the land in a lot of ways more than anything else, like natural geographic features. So how and where you invest in transportation, I think, is very, very important.
Agreed.
When we're looking at how many houses are on the market, and there's obviously not very many, it seems like the solution is to build more, right? But we know that that's super expensive, and oftentimes first-time home buyers or even second-time home buyers can't afford those new houses. My suggestion to consider would be, you know, looking at our housing study, we have a big need for senior housing. I think the thing is, there are a lot of seniors that live in Sherburne County, and are a lot of people that are retired in Sherburne County, and that population is gonna double over the next 20 to 30 years. I was just looking at our population projections for the region in our SEDS report, and those populations are gonna double over the next 20 to 30 years. And I think if we could find creative housing solutions for seniors to entice them to get out of their homes, because they want more than assisted living or just a townhome area. They want a lifestyle, okay? They're picky, they have needs, they have wants, they've got money. And if we can come up with creative housing solutions that is gonna entice the senior population out of their homes, we will have way more affordable homes on the market.
So zoning for those type of developments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important to point out that there's only so much you can do on the government side. Most of this is the pre-market system, supply and demand. But from our role, in my opinion, it's to make sure that the zoning is there, that the opportunity for the developments to come in and implement that piece is available. Great point. But yeah, senior housing been a topic for 20 years, huh, Rayanne? Don't answer that.
I can't help it. I'm waiting to be in something I can move up into. I don't look at it as I'm downsizing. I'm not wanting to give up my amenities of my home.
Right.
I want to see them in the next home, and they're not here right now.
Understood.
Obviously, housing, I think my concern too is the gap. So people, I've got a 24 and 26-year-old, and they don't want to be in an apartment. They want to be in, they would consider a townhouse, but they don't want to be in an apartment. They want to be in a house, and there is nothing here that they can afford to be into, that they can get into. And so I think it is definitely that stretch too, and between the upper class, if you will, and the lower class. We're our middle class. That's what we're losing. And that's concerning because that's our workforce too. So I think that's concerning for me. Childcare is a hot button for me right now. I'm working with First Service, Finance and Midwest Miles on Midwest. They have all these fancy names, but we are working, it's probably gonna be a 12 to 24-month process, but looking at putting in a 20,000 square foot childcare center to house, but that's only gonna take 200 spots. And there's a 1,000 spot waiting list in Elk River.
There's actually a small community in Minnesota, the Economic Development Authority just approved a city-funded and paid for construction staffing of a childcare facility to attract people to their community, to increase the workforce.
Where's that at?
And if I can
Very
jump in on-
rural Minnesota,
Well, yeah, and I can jump in, I'll say Stevens County also has made childcare an economic development priority. And they have funded what they call a childcare pod, it will move in the spring. So there are some models, if you wanna look at that, we can pull some stuff in.
We're back to you.
Just quick, I think it's really important that as you guys are doing this planning, and, you know, we're talking about hamlets like Palmer and San Diego and that sort of thing, that our highway department or public works we're planning roads for these areas that make sense. I mean, we at one time had some industrial area that was served with a 7-ton road, and we hadn't, you know, in the springtime when road restrictions came on, we weren't able to serve it well. So you know, there's so much to be done here, and you gotta break out of the silos. We gotta be talking to everybody so that we come up with something that works. If we stay in a silo, we're gonna have trouble, so that's all that I have.
If I could just, one really quick, I know we're kind of moving on time, but I think the connection to zoning ordinance, our comp plan will bring us a policy eventually to ordinance, and making an ordinance that's friendly for people to invest in, that they can afford to invest in, you know, the developers that can afford to come into our county and to invest in the types of development. And I think conversations with those developers from this economic development department, hey, you know, we need people to come build here, we need people to come invest in housing here, but we have to find a way to get them to the table, to hear the conversations, to make sure we're creating ordinances that, you know, I think meet our needs, but we're not talking to
So are you
developers.
saying that EDA should take a bigger role in when developers are looking at Sherburne County?
Well, what do developers need? I think as you guys start looking at your mission statement and your vision statements, what is this EDA board going to do?
Well, we are. Unfortunately, you got a head start on us with I wish we had started our strategic plan.
Well, but
it would have been easier, but.
And Lance, I think our intent is to incorporate the work that, you know, this group does. I think that point, you know, how do we incorporate and pull in what this group does into our section in the comprehensive plan? So our section of the comprehensive plan is going to reflect kind of the decisions that this group is eventually moving forward with into the future. Right, Lance? That's kind of.
Oh, yeah, yep, spot on. I mean, we want to make sure all of these planning efforts are in alignment. We definitely don't want to be creating a comp plan that doesn't align with your vision or your next steps. So I think there's a lot more work with you guys as we start to draft materials for you to provide input on those materials and give us comments. So yeah.
Can I jump in and just add one thing, and then I'll mute myself and be quiet? One thing that jumped out at me on your information was the retail component looking like it's gonna be stepping down due to the way that people are now buying and doing more online and such. Is there any look at what does that look like going into the future, tax base wise, as some of these retail areas maybe won't be growing or will struggle to fill space? I'm just curious because that kind of jumped out.
Yeah, no, and I don't think the comprehensive plan will get to that level of detail of understanding what the actual impacts are from a tax base. It's more recognizing that these trends are real now and that there is a change in commercial retail space. So how do we best address that if that does come to fruition and there is more vacant space, and how do you utilize that space?
Well, then that's something we could look a little more closely at with the EDA strategic plan.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
One thing I just want to add, I think it's important when we're dealing with a comprehensive plan, we really need to take a look at what Sherburne County's growth has been, and it's been really balanced. Like we've weathered all the ups and downs of the economy over the last so many years because we have a relatively balanced economy. And we want to make sure that, you know, you can tailor comp plans so they antagonize certain types of growth. But if we do want to antagonize certain types of growth, what is it? And it sounds like housing is what we want to antagonize. And if that's the case, we just need to be careful because you don't want to get down a path where you all of a sudden got to overcorrect inside the parameters of what these plans usually last, which shelf life's usually 10 years.
Yeah.
You just got to be careful of that, I think, more than anything.
Yeah.
We don't need to over-govern and try and shape more than the market has here. The market's been good. We've grown even, we've grown nice because of our geographic location between two major metros and the transportation corridors that we have. You know, a lot of our growth is to a certain extent on autopilot. We just got to figure out the guardrails to put in place so we don't have bigger issues. You know, 25 years down the line, there's different people sitting in these seats trying to deal with the problems that we made. So
yeah.
Thinking about the schools and the impact of growth in schools, so that's the one that keeps popping in my head.
It definitely is our time, so we
Makes
just need
sense.
to take advantage of it. So just in the lieu of time, if are there any other final comments on this? If not, I think I'd like to move along, if that's all right.
Yeah, we'll probably skip number 5 and do that at a future meeting, but Jessica does want to spend just a couple minutes on number 6.
Okay, so just real quickly, the worksheet that I sent out, thank you. There were 6 of you that sent it back, so thank you for sending that back. There were 2 questions that were asked that were geared towards a vision statement and 2 questions that were asked that were geared towards a mission statement. And I've compiled all the results that I got back and put them in a document, which I'm going to send out. But I just want to read through a couple words that popped up frequently. So under vision statement, the questions that were asked were, what does the EDA want to accomplish and where should they be in 5 to 10 years? Business growth, county of choice, attract business and people, retain, support, expand the county tax base came up repeatedly. Be creative and innovative, adaptable, thriving, and then the tax base, like I said, several times. For the mission piece of it, the 2 questions that were asked there was what was the EDA's purpose and what impact does the EDA want to have on the community? Attract new businesses, expand economic growth, quality of life, more increasing of the tax base, developed property, take a role in developing property, and then challenging property, or take on those challenging properties. Be a partner, serve, generate growth, invest, diversified economy, sustainable economy, educate, advocate, connect, and be positive. Those were the main themes that were coming through in the feedback that we got back. So what I did was I created a draft vision statement from that stuff and a draft mission statement, and I'm gonna kick it back out to you guys, and it's intended to be picked apart because it's too big and too long, but I want you guys to craft your own. It's just to give you a place to start. So that is gonna be coming out with all the feedback and then those 2 statements, and just mull over that over the next month and bring your feedback in January.
Great. Next meeting?
January 26th, that'll be our annual meeting, so there'll be a lot of business, but I think we'll dive deeper into what Jessica's just presented. And just before we go, Ken, I'd like to acknowledge Felix and Tim. This is their last meeting. Felix has been around for 20 years, been very involved in economic development, and same with Tim. That's been kind of his priority over the last 6 years, so I just want to acknowledge him.
Yeah, no, greatly appreciate your service, and even today, Felix, thanks for the round the table suggestion. Worked great.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, for sure.
Yeah, indeed.
All right, well, if there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? How about that, Rand? I remembered both the approval of the agenda and the minutes. It's the only reason she's here is to make sure.
You did good. Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas.
You might be cruising towards the job for